Oh, there we go. I think this has been my fault. I think I was staring at the waiting room. I think everybody would come in, and I don't think I'd let anybody in. Hey, Lisa. Hey, Tiffany. All right. Just making sure we've got everybody here. I don't know if Tim is joining us for today. That's all right. We'll get started. We'll get started. Just out of curiosity, was anybody a part? We did a similar webinar, geez, about a month or so ago, on the concept of the family journey. Was anybody a part of that? When we talked about the family journey, you were a part of that, Lisa? Okay. Yeah, so we'll talk a little bit about that. We'll take a deep dive into some of the things that we're seeing work really well right now. One second, let me get everything. So some of this in the beginning here, Lisa, might be a little bit of a repeat for you, but I think it's just so important, in my opinion, to understand how we need to position ourselves, especially from a marketing perspective. Um, Let me remove the meeting. How we have to position ourselves from a marketing perspective to influence families' decisions as as the landscape gets more competitive, as we move ever so quickly into this AI powered world, um, where so much of the decision making is being done before anybody ever speaks with somebody at the school. And I think that's one of and that's kind of jumping ahead, one of the key takeaways, which is all about how much families can do without ever talking with anybody. So let's start there. Let me share my screen. Bear with me. Now, Lisa, if you remember this answer, don't cheat. So, as coming from the marketing world, um, and if you've ever looked up anything about marketing, there was always this old accepted fact of how often somebody needs to see your school, your brand, your information. And I've said this multiple times before, but for anybody who hasn't seen this, um, it used to be 5 to 7 times, right? They need to see your ad, your um, your website, talk with somebody at least 5 to 7 times. But now those numbers are upwards of 33 times. I've seen anywhere from 11 to 33. But this is such like for me, this is such a big deal because it impacts how much we need to advertise, how we need to get out there in a variety of different ways. Um, Hold on, sure. Waiting. Okay. Now the other thing, has anybody seen the parent survey data from niche.com? Has anybody seen that? Put in a one if you haven't, a two if you haven't, or unmute and feel free to hop in. At least you have question mark also works. So niche.com parent survey data. I would recommend everybody take a look at this. I think this might be their new one. Yeah, this is their new one. I'm going to open this one up. And I'll open this one up. Niche.com, I have mixed opinions about. I think a lot of people do. But one of the things you can't deny is they get a lot of data, a lot of data. So I think it's really good data to help determine, what's really happening with how parents are searching and finding schools. So this was their 2023 report, and let me highlight a few things. So let's go through a few items here. Why did parents leave their previous school? Academic concerns. That jumps out. So we're going to come back to this, but why is that important? This is important because I am working with schools every single day on marketing campaigns and ad campaigns. And the question always comes down to, what should we be marketing? Well, if you're not marketing at least something related to academics, you're potentially missing out on an opportunity to attract those families, especially those that are looking to switch schools. Okay. So that this is a big one. Let me scroll down to a few other things. This is always a big one for me. When did the search start? Meaning, how far in advance to making a decision did they start doing research about the school? And I believe the number is greater than 60% if we add up that over 60% were 6 months or longer away. 6 months, 1 to 2 years, 2 years or more. So if you add those up, you're upwards of 60 some percent. So what does that mean? That means if somebody finally contacts you and we'll talk about the decision making process, if they once they contact you, they're still potentially months away, if not a year, from making the decision. So how do we influence that decision? We'll talk a little bit about that. 27%. I know we all think about word of mouth, and word of mouth in general will likely drive 80% or more of your enrollment. There's no denying that word of mouth is the key driver to enroll students. And there's a lot that obviously goes into that. But then there's always, well, if you want to fill your seats with more schools or grow your wait list, it's how do we fill those gaps? And this is really interesting to see that close to 30% of families are starting with searches on Google saying private schools near me, Montessori schools near me, best schools, best middle schools, whatever it might be. So a lot is happening on Google. Another interesting fact, the number of schools parents are considering. So if we look at the pink, the white, and the green, what does that add up to? 64% are considering 3 or more schools. All right, what else we got here? What caused parents to remove their schools from shortlist? 70% said difficulty finding reviews was an important factor. We're going to talk about that. First steps was attending an event. So event marketing is a big deal now. And I think those are the main things. Okay, so let's add all these things up. So 64% of families are choosing 3 or looking at 3 or more schools. More than 60% of families are 6 months out. So 6+ months looking at multiple schools. They're searching on Google. They might be looking to switch schools for academic concerns. And even if they're looking to switch, they're still doing that research. By the way, just out of curiosity, from those numbers, did anything jump out? Anything jump out at you? Anything surprising from those numbers? Or is that kind of what you expect? Academic concerns. And by the way, Lisa, this was 2023. 2024, they haven't done a report just like that, but they did kind of like a mid-year report from 2024. Still waiting for the full 2024 report. I don't know if I missed it at all, but It says academics are still a top motivator for switching schools. So academics are a big one. Event experience is crucial. Is everybody here doing events? Anybody not doing events of some sort? Oops. So if you're not doing events, events are a big deal. This is one of the first steps. So families like going to events. We'll come back to this. Competition is as fierce as ever. So again, from 2023, 2024, not a whole lot has changed. Um, yeah, Tiffany, good point. I wonder how numbers compare to pre-COVID parent surveys. That's very interesting. I think one of the big ones had to do with events, where events now are becoming a focal point. And we can draw a lot of conclusions for that. Maybe it's because they're evaluating so many schools, they'll go to multiple open houses. Um, maybe it's a little bit more passive. Um, so this is the 2024. I just want to see if there's anything here that jumps out that I forgot about. Have a strategy to market prospective students. Yeah, we can talk about that. Okay. So still competition extremely high. Academics still at the top of what's motivating parents to potentially switch schools. Um, Event experience. So let's pull this back to the parent journey or the family journey. So it all starts with awareness. So I think probably one of the parents, I feel like they might sometimes they think they're being nice by saying this, but as school administrators, marketers, heads of school, we probably hate hearing this, which is you're the best kept secret, right? If you ever heard the best kept secret, nobody wants to hear the best kept secret. We want to be the best or the best school option, but nobody wants to be the secret. No, we want to be known everywhere. We want you to know who we are. So a large part of the battle is creating that awareness. So how do we create awareness? That can certainly be through word of mouth. That can be through some sort of advertising. Now, advertising comes in many shapes and sizes. We're talking, you can do billboards and radio, you can do niche.com. All of those things are very, very expensive. You can do Facebook ads, Google ads, you can do search engine optimization. We'll get into that here in a second. Um, Lawn signs, right? There's a lot of things to do. Now, I will say when it comes to awareness, though, this is really where your opportunity costs come in, right? If you opt in for that $10,000 niche.com package, right? That's probably one of the most common questions I get asked about advertising. Should we go pay niche.com? And I have nothing against them, right? But I always think that it's an opportunity cost. If you're going to go spend 10,000, I think even Tim had said he was pitched one time on like a $20,000 plan, some sort of marketing package. If you're going to spend it there, that means you probably can't spend that 10 to 20 somewhere else. Is there a better opportunity? Is there a better usage of that 10 to 20? Usually 9 out of 10 times, I'm going to say, yeah, probably there's going to be better options for you, or probably 99 out of 100 times. Now, if you've got ads running all over the place and you're looking for different avenues and your budget's gigantic, yeah, throw that in the mix. That wouldn't be a bad thing. But um, what I typically, when I'm guiding schools on whether, if you say, hey, my budget's $500 a month, my budget's $1,000 a month, where should I go spend that? Typically, I will say we're looking at Meta and or Google, depending upon what that budget looks like. So anyway, though, and we think about the family journey, the first step is we got to make them aware that you exist. Then we also have to make sure, are you being found at the top of Google? So we know from that survey data, what was it, 27% of the search is happening on Google. So, or I should say the search engine, but really it's Google search. And what does that mean? That means organic search. So at the top, and just to make sure we're all on the same page. So if I type in private schools near me, so what do we have? We've got These three at the top, these are paid ads, sponsor, sponsor, sponsor. We've got maps listings. So this is like an organic search unto itself. So you ideally want to be here. And then you have your true, now ignore all this stuff on the side. I constantly have extensions and plugins that give me some additional data. But for the most part, you're going to see these organic listings here. So the question becomes, how do we dominate the search engines? You can pay for ads, you can try to get to the top of the maps, and then ideally you want to be in a top 2, top 3 position here, because once you get to the bottom, nobody goes to the bottom. Almost no search traffic happens on page 2. All of it happens in the top 3 listings. Does anybody have any questions about the search engine and how it works and the different nuances here? All right, cool. So again, perfect world is you have a Google ad, you're at the top of the maps listing, and you have an organic listing. Now that's the wave the magic wand scenario. Easier said than done sometimes, but that's how we get into the search engines. And then we have the reputation, right? Now reputation means reviews, but it also means more than reviews. It means looking at your social media, checking out your website, talking with friends and family, reading your blog, if you have a blog content, articles, right? They're trying to learn who you are and if they're going to choose to move forward with you. So Google actually gives us a term called ZMOT, which stands for zero moment of truth. That at this point, after being aware that you exist and doing their Google searches and talking with friends and family and reading your website and checking out your social media and looking at reviews, they're doing all of this with their phone while laying in bed for the most part, right? Um, they're not talking with anybody. I mean, besides talking with friends and family, but for the most part, all this is happening without ever talking with somebody at the school. So by the time they reached what we call the conversion point, which is I'm actually now going to decide to take the effort to fill out the form, to come to your to go to your website, fill out the form, and come on campus. They're now making an active decision and making that extra effort, taking time out of their day. Um, there was data by HubSpot that said 70% of their mind has already been made up. They're just looking for um, confirmation of what they've already learned or read or watched. So that's why it's so important that we influence the awareness stage, the Google search, the reputation. And then certainly they apply, they enroll, they have an amazing experience, they talk with friends and family, they write great reviews, and they influence that next person's decision. But when you really break it all out, I mean, there's a lot here, right? With all these stages, there's a lot that we need to focus on, which I know for many of you that are working in, what we call like a small shop, a small team, where you're likely wearing 20 different hats, right? It's how do we do all that? So what I like to do is give you focus areas where, okay, if we need to prioritize what comes first, second, third, um, usually a lot of schools want to start with the awareness stage, which is, well, I need to get more event registrations. I need to get more um, tours. Let's go advertise for them. But that's actually the last thing that you want to do because frankly, we'll call it the easier thing to do. You can just go throw a bunch of money at Google and Facebook and turn ads on pretty quickly. But if the experience on the website and the landing page is not optimized, I like to equate this to filling up a bucket with holes in it. So it becomes a leaky bucket where we can keep dumping water into it. But if our website experience, if the experience of registering is a little bit clunky, it can really hurt the performance of your campaign. If your goal is how do we maximize those event registrations? How do we maximize inquiries and tours? Or Hey, I want to make sure we get more elementary students. How do we do that? Well, it typically comes down to optimizing these other areas first. Now, some are easier, right? The apply and enroll portion, the experience portion, that's a much bigger conversation, right? That's not something you can change overnight. The conversion point you can change overnight, and we'll talk a little bit about that. And then once you have that set, you can start focusing on some of these areas. Again, any questions, anything we want to dive into a little bit more into any one of these particular areas? Again, anything surprise you about this? All right. Okay. That was an old, that was an old one. So, um, in regards to focusing on the conversion point, now we're holding a webinar on Thursday that's going to dive a little bit into this. Um, which is optimizing that conversion point, because I think that's something we can all look at, especially as we're all headed into the fall here, headed into, obviously late summer, early fall, and it's admission season is going to kick off, and you're going to start holding events. I think this is the time for us all to go take a look at. Okay, we have. Let me ask: is anybody who's running events? Anybody running an event? Lisa, what kind of event do you have coming up? Is it an open house? Open house? So if you're not running events and you're saying to yourself, hey, we've got to fill more seats, I would take a look at this data and say, how do we put on an event? Now I understand, by the way, and this is getting into, the concept of events, and it's a much bigger conversation. But events these days do come in all kind of shapes and sizes. There's the big events where you're bringing teachers in, you're bringing staff members in. There's a big to do, and it's a lot of time. And you obviously need to make sure that those are successful. Otherwise, it can. I've seen them where it upsets a lot of people. It's, hey, we've got all these people together, and four people showed up to the event, and it's like, okay, that was very frustrating. So if you're not doing events though, I would highly consider talking with your team to figure out how do we to put on an event. And maybe that first event could be a virtual event. I feel like that's, we talk about COVID, pre-COVID. Pre-COVID, there was no such thing really as a Zoom information session. During COVID, that's all it was. Post-COVID, I think many of us went back to campus events, which is obviously very important. But again, putting my marketing and admissions hat on, um, maximizing those event registrations, maximizing really the top of your admissions funnel, and getting as many people as possible. I am seeing schools that are doing both in person and virtual as really maximizing the amount of prospective families that come in, because you will get some families that for whatever reason are just like, look, I'll decide to come on campus later, but can I join an info session? So maybe that could be your first event, is an info session. It's Zoom, it's a presentation like this. Maybe you have a couple other people present, answer some questions, and that's about it. And then if you feel like, hey, we've got some attendance here, maybe you put on a bigger event. Um, but I would look at events because we now know over the past couple of years that that is what families are looking for as their first step into coming on campus. If they've got out from the computer and they're going to come on campus, it's typically some sort of event. And so as we look at the conversion point, and again, we'll dive into this a little bit more on the Thursday webinar. You should see that email invitation hit your inbox soon, where we talk about the concept of landing pages. Has anybody been on where we've talked about landing pages? Lisa, you've probably heard it. Susan, Dawn, Margot, have we talked about landing pages? Now, I want to talk about why landing pages are important. It's because if you are going to spend the money and spend the time and effort to um, try to get people to an event or schedule a tour, your landing page, I don't want to say it can make or break, but it can be a really important factor in terms of maximizing those that attend. So let me give you an example. I was just having a conversation with this school. Let me just show you their pages. Let me ask you a question. Um, these are two different types of pages, right? Register for a tour. So let me show you this page. Explore Q Forest, how to connect with us, why families love us, testimonials, FAQs, and explore. They literally just had this session today. Meet and greet. This is it. This is the page. Which page do you think converted at a higher percentage? This one, the short, let's do short or long. The short one or the long one? Who wants to guess? Feel free to either unmute or type in the chat box. What's our guess? Lisa, you said short. Anybody else think short or long? Margot says long. We're at 50-50. Yeah, so in their case, the short one won. The short one had a higher conversion rate, closer to 2% versus one was lower than 1%. Um, now, for now, it could be a variety of reasons, but this page, which was longer, converted at 6.7%. Right now, there could be a variety of factors as to why. Um, but this is really important that think about that for a second. If let's say it cost you $100 to get 100 clicks to your website, so $1 per click, which is probably about average. Um, one of these pages will get you five, six, seven registrations for that $100. Another page that isn't optimized, isn't a dedicated landing page for that event, I typically see them convert at about 1 to 1.5%. So you've spent the same $100 to get the same 100 clicks to the website, but now instead of five, six, or seven, maybe you get one, two, maybe three, right? Now you expand that over the course of multiple events, thousands of dollars. Those numbers really start to add up. So as you're sitting here and starting to plan out some of those events, I would strongly encourage you to take a look at, okay, we're going to tell people to register for our event. Where are they going to go to? And I highly recommend having a dedicated page just for that event and have it not necessarily be a part. Um, what was the short form conversion rate? That was like right at 2%. Um, Now, I still think that's a little bit low, but it was better than the 0.8% that the other one got. So it was much, much lower. And then now it's almost like you start to play a game where it's like, okay, we know this one got about 2%. Okay, how do we improve this? And we actually talked about how we're going to fix up this page. Not necessarily fix up, but test it. And we do what are called A/B tests. This page versus what if we take the style and add some additional content in here and try to get even higher. So this page went through a couple iterations. What we found on this was, let me see, what do we think converted better out of these two? we've got this one with the dark background, and we got this one with the light background. Everything else is pretty much exactly the same. What do we think did better? Dark or light background? We got dark, dark. The light background actually was the was the higher performing of those. Yeah, where did it go? Yeah, this one. This one actually did the better one. So it's interesting. And again, sometimes you never know, right? I've done this long enough to where many times I can't guess correctly, especially when it comes to ads. I've seen some beautiful ads created and they just didn't work. And some that were just so simple and they work really, really well. The point though is that as we're thinking about this, we want to think about that on-site website experience where before we start running those ads. And that can play a tremendous role in how many people actually show up for that event, come on campus, even inquire, right? I know we're talking about events, but the same can be held to be true for any time when you want to get people to take an action, which is having a dedicated page on your website to get them to take an action. I think, let me show you the school. I haven't looked at their page in a while, but I know. Oh no, I have to tell them that maybe their website is down. Hold on, that was weird. Let me see admissions. So here you go. They have a landing page specifically just to inquire, right? Nothing else on the page, no menu, none of it. The less you have on these pages in terms of menu, the higher your conversion rate will typically be. So that's why when we come back to here, we can run the same exact ads, but depending upon how good we set up um, the conversions, the conversion point can have a tremendous impact on our success of maximizing the top of funnel new family leads, if you will. Um, yeah, Dawn, this is a great question. I get asked this question all the time. Stats regarding inquiry forms, short versus long. We're struggling with wanting data and making things easier for families. Okay, so one, it depends on what you're collecting information for. I know you said inquiry, but are we lumping in inquiry with if somebody registers schedules a tour, are we calling that an inquiry, right? Or is there an inquiry form on the, by the way, I always go between inquiry and an inquiry. I don't know. I always I don't know how everybody else says it. But if it's just an inquiry form on the website, I see those as a little bit longer. Um, but let me just state in general for, okay, we currently have one form to inquire and register for an event. Okay, I'm glad you specified because I would, in general, I would absolutely recommend you split those up. The shorter the form, the higher the conversion rate. Now, that's a little bit anecdotal. I don't necessarily have, because everybody's a little bit different. I don't necessarily have the exact data to say, well, if it's this long and the conversion rate is this, because the points of entry are always different. However, um, best practices from a marketing perspective are the longer the form, the lower the conversion. Now, the higher the commitment. However, if we're talking about events, like an open house event, this really is all that you need. You can get more information later, right? If they just want to come to an event, an open house, get their name, maybe their student name, maybe grade level of interest. And that's typically what I would recommend. Get that information. Same thing for a tour. If you just want somebody to come on campus, tour, get the rest of the information later. If they're serious about moving forward, great. Fill out this form, fill out this application. You can get that information later. I also am empathetic to, I know that if you want to, if you, whatever system you're using, if you're using some of the big admission platforms, it's like you can't even get them into your system without them filling out this monstrous form, right? So I understand there's a give and take there, and I've been in these conversations many times where like you have the marketing director here, you have the admissions director here, and they're battling it out, not in a bad way, but it's like, well, we can't even get them in our system if we don't get all this information. So I understand some of you might be at the mercy of the system you're using. Short plug for our Growth Suite platform, which is you can. These are all forms you want to create. Short forms, create short forms. Create long forms, create long forms. But if I can wave the magic wand, then I'm doing forms like this for tours and events. If you want a big inquiry form because you want to get more information, which probably is going to look similar to maybe an application, I would have that. So that's my long-winded answer to how long forms should be. By the way, let me expand on this because I get hyper focused on if we're going to put this effort in, we might as well try to do all the things. They're all little pieces of the puzzle, right? All these little pieces of the puzzle to maximize the effectiveness of a campaign. Um, Especially if your form gets a little bit longer. HubSpot did another study, and it's great to rely on, some of these big billion-dollar companies. They have tons of data. Is they tested different types of forms. One was a form that was embedded on the website that's just one long form. Then there was a pop-up form. Then what was another type of form? Oh, split column forms, side by side versus one long form. And then there was the multi-step form. Does anyone want to take a guess of what the best performing type of form you could have? And I know I kind of went through this quickly, but it's a split form, two columns, one long form, a pop-up form, or a multi-step form. Meaning step one, give us parent information. Step two, give us student information. What do you think was the best performing type of form? Lisa's got pop-up. Any other guesses? Split column. There we go. See, just the amount of awkward silence, just enough of it gets the answers to come in. Pop up, split column, pop up. No, we're 0 for 3. Pop-ups do help, by the way. It's actually better to have a pop-up than not have a pop-up. Maybe not necessarily for the form, but if you want to create awareness about something. Multi-step forms get a 23% higher conversion rate than standard forms. So something like this, where it's step one, how do you want to connect with us? Well, I want to schedule a call. Okay, step two, give us your information, right? Let's just start picking. Step three, how did you hear about us? Phone, email. So these multi-step forms will have a higher conversion rate. Now, there's a psychological reason around it, which is the concept of micro commitments. That once you start the path, once you start down the path of filling it out, you're more likely to finish than if you see a big long form and it's like, well, geez, I've got 20 fields to fill out before I can submit this. Versus, well, do one or two per step. So multi-step forms. So we spent a lot of time certainly on the conversion point, but that's why there's a reason. It is whenever I'm personally or the team is helping somebody with a campaign, we start here. We start at this conversion point because everything's going to kind of funnel into there. So it's like a machine that you want to work as efficiently as possible before you start spending money and getting people to go there. Any other questions about the conversion point or this family journey? I'll talk a little bit about some of these other points here. Each one of these points could be a workshop unto itself, a multi-day workshop, and I've actually done that in multi-day, so I'll go through it in the next couple minutes. When it comes to reputation, I don't necessarily want to talk about reviews per se. Well, let's talk about reviews in a second. Or let me talk about reviews in a slightly different way than maybe how we think about it. I think one of the ways we think about reviews is what the person actually says in the testimonial, right? Probably throughout our website, we have testimonials sprinkled in, right? And yes, we want those testimonials to look or to sound amazing. There was another study done, I forget by who, but I read it, so I'll ask you to trust me. But it was what's the most impact that you're going to get from those testimonials? How do you use them? And the conclusion was it isn't so much what the testimonial says. What do you think the number one factor for you having an impact with your testimonials? If I already kind of gave you half of it, which is it's not so much what it says. What's the most impactful part of the testimonials? What do we think it is? It's a very broad question, so it's a tough one. Any guesses? Third party proof, the fact that they did one. Yeah. So let's make the assumption that um yeah, they did it. You got some third party proof. You've got testimonials in hand. I guess the better way to position this is how do we best use them? How do we best use? Maybe we should have positioned it that way. How do we best use that third party proof? So who it comes from, the parent or the student? Good guess. That might play a role. By the way, I'm not to say that doesn't play a role. Because you could say something. Well, if there's a picture and an actual name, is that better than not? Anecdotally, I would say yes. But the study was done here, and I'll give you the answer. It wasn't so much what the testimonial said or who it came from, it was the volume of testimonials. So if you're scrolling down a page and you see 3, 6, 9 testimonials on that page, that's more impactful than one testimonial that could say the best thing in the world about the school, right? If you could craft the perfect testimonial and that was there, that's going to be less impactful than if you just had 6 testimonials on that page. So think about your testimonials where they are on your, you maybe even have the testimonials on their own page if you have a lot. So have that where it's just volume of them. Let me show you how we did this with a school. Info, take a look at what we did here. Why families love Brightmont. Testimonials, just a page of testimonials that we categorize the testimonials. So this is another way to do it. So dedicated landing page for the ads, request more information. So we kind of did here everything we talked about in terms of having trying to increase conversion rate, which is multi-step, right? So we can just keep going multi-step and fill this out. We have testimonials here. So just things to think about. Thanks, Don. Thanks for joining. All right. So think about that when it comes to reviews, testimonials, a lot of them. Let's talk a little bit about Google search real quick. How do we get found in the search engines? two key ways. You can either pay to play or you can do it organically. There's pros and cons of each. If you pay to play, where was I? Google search. And that's here. You're going to pay every time somebody clicks. So if I click here, I just charge the Baldwin School a couple bucks probably. Right? So they're paying on a per click basis. This is typically going to be a lot more expensive than Meta, but it's also based upon I'm searching for private schools and you're going to show up. This might be $3, $4, $5 cost per click. You can pay today and be at the top and make sure you get found. If you don't want to do that, then you have to try to move your site to the top of Google. And that's what's called search engine optimization. Search engine optimization comes in two forms. How optimized your website is for the search engine algorithm. And then also there's this thing called backlinks, which is the more third-party sites out there, like think about your local news outlet, a local blog, niche.com. Those are all third-party sites. The more you get linked back to you, the more power that gives your website. So I've been getting asked a lot recently, how do we move up the search engines? Well, step one is get your website as optimized as possible. What does that mean? That, happy to run a report and show you. Everybody's a little bit different, but it's the title of your website or the keywords on your website. You can Google on-site optimization for SEO, and you'll probably get a million articles on how to do that. But that will only get you so far. Then you want to get more of those third-party backlinks coming back to your website. And that's usually where you end up having to pay an agency potentially to help you do that. The pros are, once you get to the top here, you can get a lot of search engine traffic because the majority of the clicks are going to happen in these top two, top three positions. So this can be good long-term traffic. The negatives are with SEO, it takes a while. If it's a very competitive keyword, it could take you 6 months, 9 months, a year to start moving up to the top of those rankings. Versus if you paid for it, you could be there tomorrow. But then you're paying on a per click basis every single month. So if anybody's looked at search engine optimization, and if you type in private schools near me, Montessori schools in Philadelphia, whatever it might be, if you're not ranked at the top, reach out to me. I can run a report for you that shows you exactly how much search volume is potential, how to rank at the top, and what it would take to move up. And our software can help you with those rankings and do all of that for you. Probably about a third of the cost of hiring an agency. But I think the most important part is just understanding what the potential is. So again, because we know so much of the traffic to your website is starting with Google, focusing on the search engine, if you're not there, getting there is going to be really important. So I know we're approaching the hour here, but I wanted to talk a lot about what the data is saying about how families are searching, how many schools they're looking at, how competitive it is, where we should prioritize our efforts, which I always focus on your website experience first, getting found and reputation second, and then driving traffic as third, because we could pay for this through social media pretty easily. Any questions as we wrap up? Anything you want to dive into or anything jump out from the session? Well, all right, everybody. Well, I'll stop here for right now. I could probably go on for another hour about ads. We've had those sessions before, but if there's any big takeaway from this, which is understand that a lot of families are looking at multiple schools. They're spending a lot of time doing that research. They're doing it on their phones, sitting at home, laying in bed, and they're making a decision about where they're going to come to an event. Focus on first, look at having events if you don't have them already, because we know that's a key thing that families are looking for. Those event pages play a big role in how effective your campaigns are. And then once you get set up, then look at how do we drive as much traffic as possible to those pages. ads, search engine optimization, creating content on social media. All right, everybody. Well, if there's no other questions, I want to thanks everybody for joining today. Um, keep an eye on your email. We're going to have a really great session on Thursday, more about events. So we've talked a little bit about events in previous sessions here. We're going to take a deeper dive into maximizing your event registrations on Thursday's session. All right, everybody. Have a good rest of the day. Bye.